for everyone for joining close to the holidays. We weren't hadn't met the past couple of weeks, but we'll have two more meetings and then have a holiday break and then come back in the new year. Keep threatening about a potential in-person meeting, and we're always looking for maybe have a small in-person meeting somewhere, but the key is getting sponsors. So if anyone has this in mind still, I know COVID isn't the topic of most people's scientific meetings, but maybe we can mix it in with long COVID and other topics like space biology or other diseases, infectious diseases. To have an overall kind of meeting with us here and maybe have an in-person meeting with everyone. Some of the papers, this from not 2 weeks ago, there hasn't been any new papers I don't think out from the group. Oh, actually there has been. There's a micro paper for my micro group I got to put on here that just got accepted and is published. So I got to add this to the list here. But some of the latest papers were these two highlighted in red, and then the micro paper I'll put up here if people are interested. And some other brief updates. Alice, he's been busy, so he hasn't actually had time for a lot of these projects he's initiating, but maybe in the new year we're going to go full speed ahead. He wants to, monkeypox is still around, but it's kind of subdued, but it's still of interest. So people were interested in looking into that. He has two case report studies that I had emailed the group a while back, a month ago. And a lot of people expressed interest to help him out, these interesting long COVID case studies. And I said he was busy, but I think in the new year he's going to pick this back up. So people who are interested in helping Al out with these papers, stay tuned. And then the long COVID subgroup get going. And then of course we have, as I've been saying, we have our YouTube channel, and we post these weekly updates for the public if people want to share. All right, so let's go right into the news.
Option. This is Kevin. Can I interrupt for a quick second?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Did you just say the long COVID group is going?
Not yet, but we'll probably start in the new year. Figure a time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So stay tuned. There's some potential newer data coming in too from other groups that maybe we could all work together with. Okay, so some in the past couple of weeks I haven't joined, but during the U.S. had our holiday break, so there's been some changes with COVID cases throughout that, and not just the U.S. but around the world. But in the U.S. news, basically, people probably haven't been paying attention, but in this group at least, the hospitalizations are pretty much going up, and one of this article points out that it's pretty much been higher than ever, even the beginning of the pandemic. And it's not all because of COVID, it's because of our triple demic. It's not this slide, was in another slide. The flu, the RSV virus, it's all contributing together to put the hospitals at a strain. So that's of a concern. And one thing that I know people have brought up to me that don't study COVID or don't pay attention to stuff, saying the news it's not in the forefront of the news, so people don't think this is really happening. So it's probably better to bring awareness to people that, yeah, there's a problem here with the flu and the virus and COVID and the RSV and virus that are really putting the strain into our hospitals. And then one thing of the triple demic here is, again, related to that, the holidays coming up, not just in the U.S., but the rest of the world. Maybe some background noise that people want to mute. Okay, so that's of a concern. This is mainly for, I guess, everyone here knows about these things, but for the public, if you want to point them to some articles and let them know what's going on, this is probably good. For example, Texas their policy it's basically ignoring COVID, and it's not a very good policy, as you can see from these articles that are saying, with the new variants, and which I'll get into in a second. One good news is that FDA cleared for kids under 5 for the Pfizer vaccine and maybe Moderna. I think this is but only Pfizer here. So that's good. So if you have kids under 15 that you want them to be vaccinated, it's now okay, and they can get it. One thing, there was you might have paid attention, it was a week or two ago or a little longer, there's this one paper that came out that was talking about how the vaccine can potentially kill brain cells and heart cells. There's a lot of these case report papers are kind of misleading in a sense where the media picks it up, and then of course sensationalize it, and the anti-vaxxers, of course, will jump on that and try to promote that for their cause. This is a nice little article talking about that and saying, no, the vaccines do not kill brain cells, heart cells. There's probably a lot of underlying things that they did not talk about in that case report that you should consider, whether like that patient had an autoimmune response or immune response and other neurological diseases and symptoms that the patient had potentially have contributed to that, and more has to be done to figure out why in that case report that happened. But just in case we need to point someone to an article based on that, if you had heard about that, here's a good response to that. I like to go to my favorite blog here, Eric Toppel's blog. He has always nice about news and updates. But one he put out a few days ago, or about 6 days ago, on the new COVID wave that's coming that I just mentioned. I will give you the updated numbers. This is 6 days old, but it's not that far off in the 6 days, but it's still going up. So basically, he does a really nice job in this blog, and I'll summarize it for you guys, where he breaks down what's happening now with the new COVID wave. As you can see, the hospitalizations are going up. You can see that this is in the U.S. And one reason, he breaks it down for the reasoning why. And one reasoning is, the waning immunity because people are not getting their boosters. And we've shown, there's papers that have shown now that the boosters are very efficient for helping, with the new variant, BQ.1.1. But you can see here, for example, this is with age breakdown, the vaccine status in the U.S. and how it's dropping in the boosters. And then, of course, it's going to attribute to waning immunity. It's not just the U.S., as he points out, it's around the world. The BQ.1.1 is the reasoning why. You can see this is all the different mutations that are happening in the spike. And one difference that he points out that people are interested is between the BQ.1 and the BQ.1.1 that makes it a lot more dangerous and help it evade immune evasion and help make it resistant to therapeutics like Evusheld is because of this mutation here, but it has all these other mutations there. Oh, sorry, was someone about to say something? Not? Okay. Fine. Feel free to interject if you have any questions or comments or insight in this. But also, this is not just Europe, but also Asia. You can't see this. I'll have more blown up plots here in a second. But this is Asia. This is Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. And you can see they're peaking now for cases. This is South America, even South American countries are starting to go up too, as you see here. So this just not the U.S. is everywhere. And one other reason he points out is that low use of Paxlovid. So Paxlovid has been shown, even though BQ.1.1 makes the monoclonals not very effective, Paxlovid still works. There's newer papers coming out that said, okay, Paxlovid is still okay for BQ.1.1. And also, as he points out, some of the more recent studies and papers are showing that it does have a reduction for long COVID. It seems like it has a reduction of long COVID by 26%. So that's promising in itself for future effects of COVID. So this is a nice blog. He breaks it down really nicely so you could actually read it for yourself about this. Some more recent news, we know you probably heard about China lifting all their policies, so the people are estimating this could lead to a lot more deaths due to the population and people might not be following protocols. This is the wastewater, which I'm going to show you more of the data in a second. So this is from the local NPR station in the Massachusetts area, but they're looking at wastewaters before and after Thanksgiving, comparing it between 2020 all the way to now. And this is 2022. We're not to the same date, as you can see the spikes happening here, but we're trending that way, and that's what's predicted from the wastewater itself. As we know, the wastewater is a pretty good indicator of what's, the waves to come and hospitalizations. And another article here talking about pregnant women and how COVID impacts them, the virus impacts them, and why they should be vaccinated. I mean, I guess there's a hesitancy here. They talk about from only 70% of women who are pregnant have completed the primary vaccination series, leaving 30% unprotected, and even less for boosters. 50% have opted for booster shots, which make, as we previously talked about in the previous slide, why that's of a concern. So, and there's been plenty of studies now done showing that COVID can cause morbidity in pregnant women, and also not just that, but impact the baby inside and it could cause like stillbirths, mild illnesses, and even affect their development in the brain once the baby is born. So that's of a concern, and I guess people want to point people who they know who are pregnant or haven't got vaccinated or haven't got their boosters. Maybe this is a good article to point to them. So here's some long COVID news now. One thing here is this talking about how, as I keep mentioning, and I'm sure everyone here knows, this is probably the next health disaster and how much it's going to impact the society in the next years to come and the impact of it. Here's a nice little paper. Some of you may know Frank Slack. I know him. I think I might try to see if he wants to come give a talk in the beginning of the year about this paper. But this is a very interesting, I really like this paper. It came out 4 days ago. And it's talking, I guess the inflammation group might want to pay attention to this paper because they're talking about how severe COVID, they did a bunch of sequencing on autopsy from the brains from, I forget the end number, I think it was 30 or 40, but they had severe COVID patients who had died, in the brain. And then they had COVID brains from autopsy brains from patients who had not had COVID but died of other causes. And they had the age groups stratified too in here, which is a pretty nice representation of the age groups. It's in the paper, you have to read it. So they did a really nice job sequencing this, and then having age matched controls, unaffected and infected brains, and then they did some nice analysis. And I think this data should be available publicly too, so we could. I'll reach out to Frank and see if he wants to give a talk, maybe provide some of the data with us and collaborate with us, but also independently if you wanted to scour the web and look in this paper and find the link for the data and start mining it yourself. That might be a good idea too. But I'll reach out to Frank. So the paper itself is neat because they looked at a lot of. I mean, I don't know if they focused this on the paper or if they just happened to stumble upon it. But the dominant signatures were related to inflammation in the brain, and they're saying that this could cause, in the signature that they actually mapped it to, is said, looking at different factors, they said it's related to basically advanced aging. Basically they compared it to different aging signatures and genes associated with that, and they noticed that with these severe COVID patients, it could cause, basically an accelerated aging model in a sense in the brain. What they did not talk about is mitochondria. So for our mitochondrial group, Doug and folks, if we get access to this data, which I think we can get access, because I know Frank, we should probably see how the mitochondrial factors change. But they really focus on inflammation as a figure. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Doug. Just absolutely, and with the connection that we have with mitochondria and inflammation, we could follow up on that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll email Frank and CC some of you guys there, since I know him, and I've introduced Frank to some of you people. I think Steve, I've introduced you to Frank. But
with Jeff coming to your lab, it'll be a breeze.
Exactly. Yeah. So Eve, I mean, that's something, I don't know if whenever Jeff recovers from his defense, if you guys wanted to look at the accession number for the publicly available data for this omics, you guys could start tackling it even before I email Frank.
Our aim is to finish 2 papers, at least 1 paper before Jeff gets to Doug's lab.
Okay, after it then. Yeah. Sounds good. Okay, but yeah, so this is an interesting paper people want to read because it had some. This is just one figure from the paper, but it was pretty neat.
Can you say the PubMed number?
The PubMed number I don't have on here.
Sometime later, not now.
Yeah. I'll send the link to I'll send the PDF. How about that to you guys after
how did they get the samples? Oh, they're post-mortem.
Yeah, so he's at actually Beth Israel here in the Boston area, and so they basically had, I guess just like Rob, got samples for the autopsy.
Yeah.
Folks, they had the same thing, IRB, and then I guess the controls. I haven't read the methods. What the controls were from? Maybe it was car accident, or maybe it was other diseases. I wasn't sure which were the controls were made up of. You have to read the methods, so I haven't read the methods of this paper, I admit. but I'm sure they go. I'll ask Frank if he wants to give a talk to this our group one in the beginning of the year, so you could ask him all the nice questions everyone has whenever he has time, or maybe the first author Maria, maybe we'll ask. I don't know her, but I know her. But it's a pretty neat paper, so take a look at it. So some other COVID is that Steve had emailed me about this from the Johns Hopkins News about clotting and microclots could be maybe an indication of what maybe some people are hypothesizing that microclots could be maybe the dominant thing for long COVID, where it's residual in there and causing all the different factors that long COVID patients are going through. So this is a nice review I found that came out last month, but I didn't pay attention to it until now. But talking about thrombosis and the acute long COVID, this is a kind of a summary figure from one of their figures talk about the mechanisms about immunothrombosis in COVID patients. So it's a nice comprehensive review from these guys from Dana-Farber talking about how what they've known, what is known on the literature, and their theory of what's happening with thrombosis in COVID patients from acute and long COVID. So this kind of further talks about long COVID symptoms and how clotting could be and thrombosis could be part of maybe one of or the driving mechanisms for long COVID or one of the driving mechanisms. So take a look at that paper. And this is a nice kind of an overview diagram of the theory or hypothesis based on the reviews. I don't know if people have any questions. We might have a shorter meetings. Other than these long COVID news is unfortunately not. And the other news here, there's not much positive news coming out of COVID these days, and with our triple demic happening. So let me. And this is the long COVID dashboard that I've put here for people's references if they want to look at it. This is older numbers, but it's kind of a nice dashboard to monitor, and at least in the U.S., depending on state you live in, what estimated long COVID numbers are there. As I mentioned, the variants now. Dominant is BQ.1.1. BQ.1 is there too, which I'll show you in a second. This dashboard here by this person is a nice one to represent what's happening in different states. The dominant ones.
Oh man.
Sounds good.
Yep. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Please mute your microphones if you haven't already. So thanks. Okay. So the wastewater I mentioned in that one news article is concerning, and usually the wastewater, if it's showing a trend up, that means a couple of weeks from now we're going to see a huge outburst of actually in people. So you can see this is the BioBot one I like, that you can see the overall in the US, so on average now we see a pronounced increase happening here. And actually BioBot updated their front page to actually show your variants here. It's a nice diagram here to show what's happening. So BA.5 is this light, I guess what we call this cyan color. But you can see BQ.1 is here, and the BQ.1 also includes BQ.1.1. So they just lumped it together when this dark, I guess, teal or whatever you want to call this color. So you can see how this is rising quickly over the past couple of months. And the regions, doesn't matter. It seems like it's rising everywhere in the U.S. And you can see this is where I live. There's been a spike happening up here. It's coming down, but I think that's coming down. I think it's misleading. I think it's going to go back up. This is the overall trends, the CDC tracker. They changed their color profile here. I think they made it more calming so you don't get as alert or scared when you look at this. But they changed it to this calming blue. But you can see now BQ.1, they've also added BQ.1.1 and BQ.1. So they had, obviously, because these are dominant strains are happening, you can see how BA.5 is quickly becoming nothing. And that's what we saw the trend when BA.5 popped up. The same trend happened, where it quickly took over. And then for a while it was dominant. And then BA.4.6 we thought at one point was going to be taken over, but it stayed about here. And then BQ.1.1 outcompeted everyone else. And now it's becoming dominant form, along with BQ.1, but I think as you see, BQ.1.1 is quickly taking over everything, which is concerning due to the fact that, as I showed you earlier, due to the mutation that has, the extra mutation has in the spike that will make it a lot of like monoclonal antibody therapeutics and Evusheld ineffective. So that's what people are concerned about. And some people hypothesize that's why there's a the uptake in a lot more COVID cases in the hospital, hospitalizations are because of that variant mutation, all the mutations that occur there. But you can see the region distribution here, breakdown. It's almost uniform around the U.S. of the variants. So now globally, this is kind of, can't make much here, but I think it's a usual trend. So if you break it down by continent, like, go to the Asian countries, Europe, United States, and of course the North American country, the Canada follows U.S. trends usually. In South America, you can see how, surprisingly, in Asia, you can see this is South Korea's here, Japan here, they're having a big spike of new cases, and Hong Kong's here, as we hear about in China. U.S. and everyone else is down here is this kind of dwarfed it, but these guys are rising too. And hospitalization, the countries that do report it, you can see like the U.S. and South Korea, they're going up, and new deaths are going up as expected. And ICU, same thing. So if you break it down by country, I showed Germany because Germany was one of the first countries in Europe that had the BQ.1.1 spike. You can see here. And one thing that I guess, again, the media doesn't really talk about anymore, so I've talked to my wife about this, and is I guess the public doesn't really realize that this was back when COVID first started. Hospitalizations are a lot higher than when we first started in a lot of countries. So but no one really capitalizes that and mentions that it was much because the deaths are lower, which is good, because due to the more understanding of how to maybe treat it when people are in the hospital and the vaccinations. So that's a plus, but the hospitalizations are actually a lot higher than when we initially had COVID, as the news articles, the CNN article I showed you earlier had mentioned. So I guess that's something that should be conveyed better to the public, that maybe a simple thing like a mask can help reduce this. But yeah, so BQ.1 was Germany was the initial spike in Europe, and now they're having the spike go back up again. It's never really went back down for hospitalizations to zero. Basically, what levels were here or here. France, same trend. It was not the same trend, but they're actually increasing. Same trend as the rest of the world. They're going up in cases, hospitalizations. Luckily, the deaths are low. I think again due to the better treatment options and vaccination. UK surprisingly is not going up. So usually UK follows the trend of Europe, but I guess we'll have to wait to see what happens after the holidays or during the holidays. I guess people who are traveling to the UK, you might feel a little better that they're not following the Europe spike here, but we'll see in the next weeks to come. US, we've already mentioned. Here's the hospitalizations going up, the cases going up, and people are expecting, as we showed from the wastewater, there's plenty of evidence to show this is going to rise rapidly. Now, South America, they were pretty good for a while until the last 2 weeks. So I usually show Brazil and South America. South America usually follows Brazil pretty closely, so you can see the trend going up. Cases going up, unfortunately, no hospitalization data really. Hospital admission data is there, unfortunately, but the deaths are low, which is good because I know like Brazil has a high vaccination rate. I don't know if they're getting the boosters as much, or if they have the boosters we have like the bivalent booster, but I heard that it's not really rolled out there yet, unfortunately, but maybe this could account for the new cases. Now, Japan, as I said, is a alarming case, where, again, a lot of the Asian countries like Japan and South Korea were relatively low until Omicron hit them. And then now they had the spike here earlier, and then now this is the BQ.1 spike that's happening, as you can see. New cases, patient ICUs, new deaths. South Korea has also having a spike, as you can see. As I said, a lot of the Asian countries follow suit with each other. And then Australia also is following that, similar to the Asian countries. Australia is also following those trends. South Africa, amazingly, I mentioned before this cyclical kind of pattern you see. For whatever reason, they're not having any new cases or spike in anything, so that's surprising. And I haven't found in the news or reasoning why that is, or people are looking into it or not. South Africa actually does a good job of reporting cases and sequencing still their patients, but Yeah, I don't know if anyone has any insight on this.
Ashton, do you know if there's any correlation between the spread and the volume of air traffic or other sort of transport traffic? Because I know there's been a clampdown in South Africa on visas. So you find very little air traffic now. I think even the national airline has been completely hit by this the visa process. It's very difficult for people to travel outside of South Africa. We're going back with the family in February, so it's good to know this data. But I also you commented on the UK. I wonder if there's a correlation. Is this one of the benefits of Brexit, or one of the very few benefits of Brexit, that there's less traffic between the European mainland and the UK?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been modeling papers in the past 2.5 years, talking about how air traffic and contributes and to the distribution and spread of COVID and how it could rapidly go. So I had no idea about what the South African visa. Maybe that's it. Maybe you've nailed it. This is why there's no cases, because there's no one's coming into the country bringing the variants.
That could be it, and it could just be a very strong correlation there.
I wonder. I got to look to see if there's anyone's looked at papers. I haven't seen any papers talking about it, but this could be some neat little modeling paper.